Hey, my name is Blake Amingo, and today what I'm going to be demonstrating for you is how to cook a proper steak. This is something that could benefit you down the road, whether or not you're making dinner for a significant other, or you have one of those classic movie scenarios where you're trying to impress your boss in order to get a promotion. I'm going to go through three basic steps. A, how to select the proper steak, what to look for. B, how to season it and make sure it's ready to go before the cook, and see how to properly cook it and what to do after it's done. So the first thing we're going to look for is what type of steak to buy. This is one of my favorite cuts of meat. It's a prime rib. One of the things that you want to look for in a prime rib or any cut of steak is that you have proper marbling. What marbling is these little pockets of fat that are coursing through the nice thick red meat. What that does is, A, fat is where a lot of the flavor comes from. That's going to keep the steak tasting that good classic steak. Two, another thing that proper marbling does is it allows you some room for error. The more fat the steak has, the more you can mess up with it, the more leeway you have while you're cooking it. It's also going to make the steak nice and juicy. So on to step two, something that you're going to want to do is season it. As you see right here, this one is good and raw. Just take it out of the bag. Actually, I'll take a step back. Before that you want to start seasoning it, one pitfall that a lot of people commonly make is they take the steak right from the refrigerator or right from the store, and then they put it right on the grill. You're not going to want to do that, because that means the inside of the steak is going to be a lot cooler than the outside of the steak. It's going to cause for uneven cooking. You're going to want to let it raise up to room temperature before you want to do anything with it. So it's going to take about 15 minutes, depending on how long you've had it in the refrigerator or if you've just bought it from the store. A lot of people like to use just salt and pepper. You'll see a lot of classical chefs like Gordon Ramsay, or if you're a YouTube person binging with Babish, they'll suggest just salt and pepper. What I like to do is something like Montreal steak seasoning. It's really simple. All you do is really make sure you get a good amount on there. Make sure the meat is nice and dry too, that way it really sticks in. And you really want to make sure that you get it nice and deep. Pat it on there. You don't want it falling off, because if that's the case, you're going to have two issues. A, you're going to not be able to form that nice crust that you want when you bite into a steak. And B, you're going to lose a lot of flavor. So do that for one side, flip it over, do it for the other side, and by the time you're done seasoning, it's going to look a lot like this steak over here on the left. The reason why it's a little darker is because I also did something called Dale seasoning on it. It's just a soy sauce and a few other mixtures that really helps add a little extra flavor, a little extra saltiness to your steak. So what you're going to do after this, after the seasoning portion is finished, is you're going to want to decide what you want to cook it in. Personally, I like to do a cast iron skillet. It gives the steak a nice thick crust, and it allows for really even cooking because of just how they are designed. You want it to be about 400 degrees before you start cooking, so make sure it's nice and hot. You don't want to put the meat on a cold cast iron skillet and then allow for it to warm up, because you're going to get uneven cooking on one side or the other. So go ahead and make sure that skillet is nice and hot already before you're ready to go. Another thing you're going to do is put down some type of oil. I prefer olive oil. A lot of people use vegetable oil. You can also use avocado oil or shortening. I don't suggest butter because it has a lower smoke point than those things. So while smoke is good, you're going to get burnt butter, and that's going to be not so good. So we're going to make a transition from in here. We're going to put this on my grill that I have going on right now. You see that I have it right now about 406 degrees. And right now I got my skillet nice. I've already cooked one. So that's one of the noises you're going to want to hear, is that nice loud sizzle. That means two things. A, that you got the skillet hot enough already. And B, it's going to help the crust formation. So put that down. one of the things you're going to want to do in order to achieve a nice even cook is about once a minute, you're going to flip this back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Now, if you're like me, I like my steak between rare and medium rare. Rare is you're sitting at about 130 degrees by the time you're done. Medium rare, you're looking at 145. So that plays out to about 8 minutes of total cooking. So as you're doing this, a lot of people like to do something like this, garlic in here. You can either put garlic right on top of it, or something else that a lot of people like to do is pour butter on top of it too. That's just going to give it an extra flavor, but what it's also going to do is allow a nice thick crust to form. You hear me mention that a lot, but the crust is important when you make a steak. You want it to be nice and crunchy on the outside, while you still get a nice red center. It's pretty easy. All you do from here, like I said, just flip it back and forth. You can already see how that's already starting to turn a lot more brown. The seasoning that we have on it already is starting to give a nice crust just right from the get-go. So instead of watching me do this for 8 minutes, we're going to go inside and transition back to this steak that I made earlier. Here's the finished product. As you see, it's not as dark as I normally like it, but it does have that nice crust. Allow me to get a knife 1 second. We're going to make sure that you didn't overcook it. A lot of times with a thinner piece of meat, you can tend to overcook it, but hopefully this will be nice and pink in the middle. As you see, it's a little overcooked, but that's not the end of the world. It's still going to taste really good. The last common pitfall that a lot of people make when they're doing a steak is they don't allow for it to sit once they get done cooking it. You're going to want it to sit for about 15 minutes to allow the meat to soak up all those juices that it lost during the cooking process. While it's sitting on your plate, it will do a lot of that. So remember, just allow it to sit. I know you're hungry. I know it looks good, but it's going to be a lot better in the long run. So anyway, that is how to cook a steak. Hope you enjoy. Have a great day.